Welcome to Lunar Reflections, where we slow down, think deeper, and rediscover what truly matters in life. If you're tired of chasing things that don't fulfill you, this channel is for you. Make sure to subscribe and be part of a space that values meaning over noise. Now, let's begin. Honesty has long been recognized as one of the most essential values in human life. From early childhood, we are taught that telling the truth builds trust, strengthens relationships, and forms the foundation of good character. In families, friendships, schools, and workplaces, honesty is often praised as a virtue that defines integrity and earns respect. A person who is known to be honest is seen as reliable, trustworthy, and morally grounded. Without honesty, communication breaks down, relationships weaken, and societies struggle to function effectively. It is no exaggeration to say that honesty is one of the cornerstones of a meaningful and stable life. However, when people think about honesty, they often focus primarily on how they present themselves to others. They worry about telling the truth in conversations, keeping promises, and maintaining transparency in their actions. While these outward expressions of honesty are undoubtedly important, they represent only one side of a much deeper concept. There is another, often overlooked dimension of honesty that is far more personal and, in many ways, far more challenging: honesty with oneself. Being truthful to others may require courage, but being truthful to oneself requires a different kind of strength, the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths that cannot be hidden behind polite words or social expectations. In reality, it is much easier to deceive ourselves than to lie to others. People frequently avoid acknowledging their own weaknesses, fears, or mistakes because doing so can be painful. It is tempting to justify poor decisions, ignore personal flaws, or create excuses that protect one's self-image. For example, someone who fails at a task might blame external circumstances instead of admitting a lack of preparation. Another person might remain in an unfulfilling situation simply because they are afraid to confront the truth about what they truly want. These forms of self-deception may provide temporary comfort, but they ultimately prevent growth and lead individuals further away from understanding who they really are. This is where the insight of Sigmund Freud becomes especially meaningful. Freud, known for his work in exploring the human mind and unconscious behavior, once stated, "Being entirely honest with oneself is a good exercise." At first glance, this statement may seem simple, almost obvious. Yet, upon closer reflection, it reveals a profound truth about human nature. Freud does not describe self-honesty as something that comes naturally or effortlessly. Instead, he refers to it as an exercise, suggesting that it requires consistent effort, discipline, and practice. Just like physical exercise strengthens the body over time, practicing honesty with oneself strengthens the mind and character. The idea of self-honesty, an exercise, implies that it is not a one-time action, but an ongoing process. It involves regularly examining one's thoughts, emotions, motivations, and behaviors with clarity and sincerity. This process can be uncomfortable, as it often forces individuals to confront aspects of themselves they would rather ignore. It may reveal insecurities, regrets, or contradictions between one's values and actions. However, it is precisely this discomfort that makes the exercise valuable. Growth rarely occurs within the boundaries of comfort. By facing the truth about ourselves, we gain the opportunity to learn, adjust, and improve. Moreover, being entirely honest with oneself is essential for developing true self-awareness. Without it, people risk living in a state of illusion where their perception of themselves does not align with reality. This disconnect can lead to poor decision-making, dissatisfaction, and a lack of direction in life. On the other hand, when individuals understand their strengths and weaknesses, their desires and limitations, they are better equipped to make choices that reflect their off and excels. Self-honesty allows people to set realistic goals, build meaningful relationships, and pursue paths that genuinely align with their values. In addition, Self-honesty plays a crucial role in personal growth and emotional maturity. Admitting mistakes is often the first step toward correcting them. Recognizing one's fears can lead to overcoming them. Accepting one's limitations can inspire efforts to improve or adapt. Without honesty, these opportunities for growth remain hidden. A person who constantly avoids the truth about themselves may appear confident on the surface, but internally, they are likely to feel uncertain and unfulfilled. In contrast, someone who practices self-honesty develops resilience, confidence, and a deeper sense of purpose. Ultimately, Freud's statement highlights a powerful and often underestimated truth. Being honest with oneself is not just a moral choice, but a fundamental practice for living a meaningful life. It is a discipline that shapes how individuals think, feel, and act. It influences the decisions they make, the relationships they build, and the direction they choose to follow. While it may be difficult at times, it is also one of the most rewarding habits a person can develop. In conclusion, honesty is not only about how we interact with others, but also about how we relate to ourselves. Being entirely honest with oneself is a challenging yet essential exercise that fosters self-awareness, supports personal growth, and guides individuals toward a more authentic and fulfilling life. At the heart of Sigmund Freud's statement, being entirely honest with oneself is a good exercise, lies a deep and thought-provoking message about self-awareness and personal development. To fully understand the meaning of this quote, it is necessary to examine its key components and explore the broader implications behind them. Although the sentence appears simple on the surface, it reflects a complex psychological truth about how individuals relate to themselves and grow over time. First, the phrase being entirely honest with oneself refers to the ability and willingness to confront one's own thoughts, emotions, strengths, and weaknesses without distortion or denial. It means looking inward with clarity and courage, rather than avoiding uncomfortable truths or hiding behind excuses. In everyday life, people often present a certain version of themselves to the outside world, one that aligns with social expectations or personal ideals. However, beneath that surface lies a more complicated reality, filled with doubts, fears, insecurities, and contradictions. Being honest with oneself requires peeling back these layers and acknowledging what truly exists within. This kind of honesty is not limited to recognizing positive traits. In fact, it becomes most meaningful when individuals are able to admit their flaws and shortcomings. For example, a person might realize that they are not as disciplined as they believe, or that their fear of failure has been holding them back from pursuing opportunities. Another individual might come to terms with feelings of jealousy, anger, or insecurity that they would prefer to ignore. These realizations can be uncomfortable, even painful, because they challenge one's self-image. Yet, they are essential for genuine self-understanding. Without acknowledging these aspects, a person remains trapped in a partial or distorted view of themselves. In addition to recognizing weaknesses, being entirely honest with oneself also involves understanding one's true desires, motivations, and values. Many people go through life following paths that are influenced by external pressures, family expectations, societal standards, or the desire for approval rather than their own authentic interests. Self-honesty requires questioning these influences and asking difficult questions. Is this what I truly want? Am I acting in alignment with my values? What am I afraid to admit to myself? By answering these questions truthfully, individuals gain a clearer sense of direction and purpose. The second part of Freud's statement, a good exercise, adds another important layer of meaning. The word exercise suggests that self-honesty is not something that happens automatically or effortlessly. Instead, it is a skill that must be practiced regularly, much like physical exercise. Just as building strength or endurance requires consistent effort over time, developing the habit of being honest with oneself requires discipline and persistence. It is not a one-time realization, but an ongoing process of reflection and adjustment. Describing self-honesty, an exercise, also implies that it can be challenging. Many people instinctively avoid situations that make them uncomfortable, and self-reflection often brings discomfort to the surface. Admitting mistakes, confronting fears, or recognizing personal limitations can threaten one's sense of identity and self-worth. As a result, it is natural to resist this process. However, like any meaningful exercise, the difficulty is precisely what makes it valuable. The effort invested in facing the truth leads to growth, resilience, and a deeper understanding of oneself. Furthermore, the idea of an exercise highlights the long-term benefits of self-honesty. While the immediate experience may be difficult, the results accumulate over time. Individuals who regularly practice self-reflection become more aware of their patterns of behavior, more in control of their decisions, and more capable of adapting to challenges. They are less likely to repeat the same mistakes because they take the time to understand why those mistakes occurred in the first place. In this sense, self-honesty acts as a foundation for continuous improvement. When these two ideas are combined, the overall meaning of Freud's statement becomes clear. Being honest with oneself is a deliberate and ongoing practice that fosters inner growth and strengthens character. It is not simply about telling the truth in isolated moments, but about cultivating a mindset of openness and self-awareness. Through this process, individuals learn to accept themselves more fully, not only their strengths, but also their imperfections. This acceptance does not lead to complacency. Rather, it creates a stable foundation from which meaningful change can occur. Moreover, self-honesty plays a crucial role in shaping one's identity and personal integrity. A person who consistently avoids the truth about themselves may struggle with confusion, inconsistency, and dissatisfaction. Their decisions may be influenced by denial or unrealistic expectations, leading to outcomes that do not align with their true needs. In contrast, someone who practices self-honesty develops a clearer and more stable sense of self. They are better able to make decisions that reflect their authentic values and to build a life that feels genuine and fulfilling. Another important aspect of this process is emotional growth. Being honest with oneself requires acknowledging and processing emotions rather than suppressing them. Whether it is disappointment, fear, or frustration, these emotions provide valuable insights into one's experiences and reactions. By facing them directly, individuals can learn to manage their emotions more effectively and respond to situations with greater maturity. Over time, this leads to increased emotional intelligence and stronger interpersonal relationships. In essence, Freud's statement emphasizes that self-honesty is not merely a moral virtue, but a practical tool for personal development. It is a habit that must be cultivated through consistent effort and reflection. Although it may be uncomfortable at times, it ultimately leads to a deeper understanding of oneself and a more meaningful way of living. By treating self-honesty an exercise, something to be practiced, improved, and maintained, individuals can unlock their potential and continue growing throughout their lives. One of the most compelling aspects of Sigmund Freud's statement, being entirely honest with oneself is a good exercise, is the idea that self-honesty actively contributes to personal development in multiple, meaningful ways. It is not simply a moral ideal or a philosophical concept. It is a practical habit that shapes how individuals understand themselves, make decisions, and grow over time. When examined closely, it becomes clear that being honest with oneself truly is a good exercise because it strengthens self-awareness, improves decision-making, and fosters continuous personal growth. First and foremost, self-honesty plays a critical role in developing self-awareness. In many ways, self-awareness is the foundation of all personal growth. Without it, individuals are essentially navigating life without a clear understanding of who they are, what they are capable of, or what they need to improve. Being entirely honest with oneself means taking a clear and unbiased look at both strengths and weaknesses. It involves recognizing talents, skills, and positive qualities that can be developed further, while also acknowledging limitations and areas that require improvement. For example, a student who is honest with themselves might admit that they struggle with time management. Instead of blaming external factors such as a busy schedule or difficult assignments, they recognize that their own habits, procrastination, lack of planning, or distractions are contributing to the problem. This realization, although uncomfortable, is incredibly valuable. It provides a starting point for change. The student can then take practical steps, such as creating a schedule or setting priorities, to improve their performance. Without this level of honesty, the problem would likely persist, as the root cause would remain unaddressed. At the same time, self-awareness is not only about identifying weaknesses, it also involves recognizing strengths and potential. A person who understands their abilities can make better use of them, build confidence, and pursue opportunities that align with their talents. For instance, someone who realizes they are a strong communicator might choose a career path that allows them to express this strength, such as teaching, public speaking, or leadership roles. By being honest about what they do well, they are able to make choices that enhance their success and satisfaction. Equally important is the ability of self-honesty to prevent individuals from living in illusion or self-deception. It is easy to create a version of reality that feels more comfortable than the truth. People may convince themselves that they are doing better than they actually are, or that certain problems are not as serious as they seem. While this may provide temporary emotional relief, it ultimately leads to stagnation. Growth requires an accurate understanding of reality, and that understanding can only come from honesty. When individuals confront the truth about their situation, they are better equipped to take meaningful action and move forward. In addition to enhancing self-awareness, being honest with oneself significantly improves decision-making. Every day, people are faced with choices, some small and routine, others complex and life-changing. The quality of these decisions depends largely on how well individuals understand their own needs, desires, and priorities. Self-honesty provides the clarity necessary to make choices that align with one's true self. Rather than being driven by external influences or internal confusion, when individuals are clear about what they want and what they value, they are more likely to make decisions that lead to long-term satisfaction. For example, a person who is honest about their passion for creativity may choose a career in the arts, even if it is less conventional or financially uncertain. On the other hand, someone who ignores their true interests in favor of societal expectations may find themselves feeling unfulfilled, despite outward success. Self-honesty allows individuals to align their actions with their inner values, leading to a more authentic and meaningful life. Moreover, being honest with oneself helps individuals resist external pressures. In today's world, people are constantly influenced by social media, cultural norms, and the expectations of others. These influences can shape perceptions of success, happiness, and identity, often leading individuals to pursue goals that are not truly their own. Without self-honesty, it is easy to be swept along by these pressures, making decisions based on what others think is important rather than what genuinely matters to oneself. For instance, a young adult might feel pressured to follow a particular career path because it is considered prestigious or financially rewarding. However, if they are honest with themselves, they may realize that this path does not align with their interests or values. By acknowledging this truth, they can make a more informed decision, one that reflects their own aspirations rather than external expectations. This not only leads to greater satisfaction, but also reduces the likelihood of regret in the future. Furthermore, self-honesty encourages individuals to take responsibility for their choices. When people are honest with themselves, they are less likely to blame others or external circumstances for their situation. Instead, they recognize their role in the outcomes they experience. This sense of responsibility is empowering, as it reinforces the idea that individuals have control over their lives and can make changes when necessary. It transforms decision-making from a passive process into an active and intentional one. Beyond self-awareness and decision-making, Self-honesty is also a powerful driver of personal growth. Growth, by its very nature, requires change, and change begins with recognizing the need for it. Being honest with oneself allows individuals to identify mistakes, learn from them, and take steps to improve. Without this level of honesty, mistakes are often repeated, as the underlying issues remain unexamined. Admitting mistakes is one of the most important aspects of personal development. It requires humility and courage to acknowledge that one has made an error or fallen short of expectations. However, this admission is also the first step toward improvement. For example, a person who admits that they handled a situation poorly, perhaps by reacting emotionally or making an impulsive decision, can reflect on what went wrong and consider how to respond differently in the future. This process of reflection and adjustment leads to growth over time. In contrast, individuals who avoid acknowledging their mistakes may remain stuck in the same patterns of behavior. They may justify their actions, blame others, or ignore the consequences altogether. While this may protect their ego in the short term, it prevents them from learning and improving. Self-honesty breaks this cycle by encouraging individuals to confront their shortcomings and take responsibility for their actions. Another important aspect of personal growth is the ability to adapt and evolve. Life is constantly changing, and individuals must be willing to adjust their beliefs, goals, and behaviors in response to new experiences. Self-honesty supports this adaptability by providing an accurate understanding of one's current situation. It allows individuals to recognize when something is not working and to make the necessary changes. This flexibility is essential for long-term success and fulfillment. Additionally, people who practice self-honesty often progress more quickly than those who do not. This is because they are constantly evaluating themselves, identifying areas for improvement, and taking action. They do not waste time denying reality or avoiding difficult truths. Instead, they use these truths as opportunities for growth. Over time, this consistent effort leads to significant development, both personally and professionally. It is also worth noting that self-honesty contributes to a stronger sense of confidence and self-respect. When individuals are honest with themselves, they develop a clearer understanding of who they are and what they stand for. This clarity creates a sense of stability and authenticity that is difficult to achieve otherwise. Rather than relying on external validation, they are able to trust their own judgment and feel secure in their identity. In conclusion, being entirely honest with oneself is indeed a good exercise because it strengthens essential aspects of personal development. It enhances self-awareness by helping individuals understand their strengths and weaknesses, prevents self-deception by grounding them in reality, and improves decision-making by aligning choices with true values and desires. At the same time, it fosters personal growth by encouraging the acknowledgement of mistakes, promoting responsibility, and supporting continuous improvement. Although it may be challenging at times, self-honesty is one of the most valuable habits a person can cultivate, leading to a more authentic, purposeful, and fulfilling life. While the value of self-honesty is undeniable, the reality is that practicing it consistently is far from easy. In fact, for many people, being entirely honest with themselves is one of the most difficult challenges they face. This difficulty is not a sign of weakness, but rather a reflection of how the human mind is wired. As Sigmund Freud suggested, self-honesty is an exercise, and like any meaningful exercise, it requires effort precisely because it goes against our natural tendencies. Several key factors explain why this process is so challenging, including the human tendency to avoid uncomfortable truths, the influence of the ego, and the powerful pressures imposed by society. One of the primary reasons self-honesty is difficult is that people naturally tend to avoid the truth when it is painful or uncomfortable. Human beings are not only logical thinkers, but also emotional creatures, and emotions often play a dominant role in shaping how reality is perceived. When faced with a truth that threatens one's sense of security, self-worth, or identity, the mind may instinctively seek ways to protect itself. This protection often takes the form of denial, rationalization, or avoidance. For example, consider someone who has experienced failure in an important area of life, such as academics, career, or relationships. Admitting the real reasons behind that failure, such as lack of effort, poor judgment, or fear of taking risks, can be emotionally difficult. It may trigger feelings of shame, disappointment, or inadequacy. To avoid these negative emotions, the individual might instead blame external circumstances. The situation was unfair, other people were responsible, or success was simply out of reach. While these explanations may contain some truth, they often serve as a way to avoid confronting deeper, more uncomfortable realities. Similarly, people may avoid acknowledging their own fears and insecurities. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, and fear of being judged are powerful forces that can shape behavior in subtle but significant ways. Admitting these fears requires vulnerability, which many people are not comfortable with. As a result, they may pretend that they are confident or unaffected, even when they are struggling internally. This disconnect between internal reality and external behavior creates a barrier to self-understanding. Avoidance of truth can also manifest in everyday decisions. A person might stay in a job they dislike, remain in an unhealthy relationship, or postpone pursuing a meaningful goal simply because facing the truth about their situation would require difficult changes. In these cases, self-deception becomes a form of temporary comfort. It allows individuals to maintain a sense of stability, even if that stability is based on an illusion. However, this comfort comes at a cost. Over time, avoiding the truth leads to dissatisfaction, frustration, and a sense of being stuck. Another major obstacle to self-honesty, the ego. The ego, in this context, refers to an individual's sense of self-importance and the image they hold of themselves. It acts as a psychological defense mechanism, protecting a person's identity and self-esteem. While the ego plays a necessary role in maintaining confidence and stability, it can also become a barrier to growth when it prevents individuals from acknowledging their flaws and mistakes. Admitting that one is wrong is never easy. It requires humility, which directly challenges the ego. Many people prefer to maintain the belief that they are competent, capable, and in control, even when evidence suggests otherwise. When faced with a situation that contradicts this self-image, the ego may respond by rejecting or distorting the truth. For instance, instead of admitting a mistake, a person might justify their actions, shift blame onto others, or minimize the significance of the error. This resistance is particularly strong in situations where personal identity is at stake. If someone sees themselves as intelligent, hardworking, or kind, it can be difficult to accept evidence that contradicts that image. A student who prides themselves on being smart may struggle to admit that they did not understand a subject. A professional who views themselves as successful may find it hard to acknowledge poor performance. In these cases, the ego acts as a barrier, preventing individuals from seeing themselves clearly. Moreover, the ego often encourages comparison with others, which further complicates self-honesty. Instead of evaluating themselves based on objective standards, individuals may focus on how they appear relative to others. If they perceive themselves as doing better than their peers, they may ignore areas that need improvement. Conversely, if they feel inferior, they may become defensive or overly critical of themselves, rather than honestly assessing their situation. In both cases, the presence of the ego distorts self-perception and makes genuine honesty more difficult. In addition to internal psychological factors, external influences, particularly societal expectations, play a significant role in making self-honesty challenging. Modern society often promotes ideals of perfection, success, and constant achievement. Through social media, advertising, and cultural norms, people are exposed to carefully curated images of what a successful or perfect life should look like. These images create unrealistic standards that are difficult, if not impossible, to achieve. As a result, individuals may feel pressure to present themselves in a way that aligns with these expectations. They may hide their struggles, exaggerate their successes, or avoid situations that reveal their imperfections. Over time, this outward performance can begin to influence how they see themselves internally. Instead of being honest about their true feelings and experiences, they adopt a version of themselves that fits societal norms. For example, someone might feel pressured to pursue a high-paying career because it is associated with success. Even if it does not align with their interests or values, admitting that they are unhappy or unfulfilled in this path may feel like a failure, both personally and socially. To avoid this perception, they may continue along the same path, convincing themselves that it is the right choice. In this way, societal expectations can lead individuals away from self-honesty and towards self-deception. The fear of judgment also plays a crucial role. People are often concerned about how they will be perceived by others, and this concern can influence their willingness to be honest with themselves. If admitting a certain truth would make them feel vulnerable or expose them to criticism, they may choose to ignore or suppress that truth. This is particularly common in environments where mistakes are stigmatized or where there is little room for vulnerability. Furthermore, the constant comparison enabled by social media amplifies these challenges. When individuals are repeatedly exposed to the highlight reels of others' lives, they may develop unrealistic expectations for themselves. This can lead to feelings of inadequacy and a desire to maintain appearances rather than confront reality. In such an environment, self-honesty becomes even more difficult, as it requires going against the dominant narrative of perfection and success. Ultimately, the difficulty of being honest with oneself lies in the tension between comfort and growth. Self-deception offers immediate comfort by shielding individuals from pain, embarrassment, or uncertainty. In contrast, self-honesty often brings discomfort, as it requires facing difficult truths and making challenging changes. It demands courage, humility, and a willingness to accept imperfection. However, it is important to recognize that this difficulty is precisely what makes self-honesty so valuable. The obstacles, emotional avoidance, ego, and societal pressure aren't reasons to avoid the practice, but rather reasons to embrace it. Overcoming these barriers leads to greater self-awareness, stronger character, and a more authentic life. While the process may be uncomfortable, it ultimately provides a sense of clarity and freedom that cannot be achieved through denial or illusion. In this sense, the challenge of self-honesty is not a weakness, but a necessary part of the journey toward personal growth. It is an exercise that tests one's ability to confront reality, accept responsibility, and strive for improvement. And like any meaningful exercise, the more consistently it is practiced, the more natural and rewarding it becomes over time. Developing complete honesty with oneself is not something that happens overnight. As Sigmund Freud suggested, it is an exercise, which means it must be practiced consistently and intentionally. Like any skill, self-honesty becomes stronger over time through repetition, reflection, and effort. While it may feel uncomfortable at first, there are practical and effective ways to cultivate this habit in daily life. By engaging in regular self-reflection, learning to accept mistakes, expressing thoughts through writing, and remaining open to feedback from others, individuals can gradually build a deeper and more honest relationship with themselves. One of the most important ways to practice self-honesty is through daily self-reflection. In a world that constantly demands attention and action, many people move from one task to another without taking the time to pause and think about their experiences. Self-reflection creates a space for individuals to step back and examine their thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. It involves asking simple but meaningful questions such as, what did I do well today? What could I have done better? Why did I react the way I did in a certain situation? These questions encourage individuals to look beyond surface-level experiences and explore the deeper reasons behind their actions. Daily reflection does not have to be complicated or time-consuming. Even a few minutes at the end of the day can make a significant difference. The key is consistency. Over time, This habit trains the mind to become more aware and more honest, instead of ignoring uncomfortable moments or brushing them aside. Individuals begin to notice patterns in their behavior. For example, they might realize that they tend to avoid difficult conversations, procrastinate when faced with challenging tasks, or react emotionally under pressure. Recognizing these patterns is the first step toward change. Without reflection, these behaviors may continue unnoticed, limiting personal growth. Another essential aspect of practicing self-honesty is learning to accept mistakes rather than denying them. Making mistakes is an inevitable part of life, yet many people struggle to admit when they are wrong. This resistance often comes from a desire to protect one's ego or maintain a positive self-image. However, denying mistakes does not eliminate them. It only prevents individuals from learning and improving. Accepting mistakes, on the other hand, requires humility and courage, but it also opens the door to growth. When individuals acknowledge their mistakes honestly, they gain valuable insights into their behavior and decision-making processes. For instance, someone who admits that they handled a situation poorly, perhaps by acting impulsively or speaking without thinking, can reflect on what that led to that behavior. Was it stress, frustration, or a lack of preparation? By identifying the root cause, they can take steps to respond more effectively in the future. This process transforms mistakes from sources of shame into opportunities for learning. Moreover, accepting mistakes helps individuals develop a healthier relationship with failure. Instead of viewing failure as a reflection of their worth, they begin to see it as a natural part of growth. This shift in perspective reduces fear and encourages individuals to take risks, try new things, and step outside their comfort zones. In this way, self-honesty not only promotes learning, but also builds resilience and confidence. In addition to reflection and acceptance, writing can be a powerful tool for practicing self-honesty. Keeping a journal allows individuals to express their thoughts and emotions in a private and unfiltered way. Unlike conversations with others, journaling does not involve judgment or expectations. It creates a safe space where individuals can explore their true feelings without fear of criticism. This freedom makes it easier to confront thoughts and emotions that might otherwise be suppressed. Writing about one's experiences encourages clarity and honesty. When thoughts are put into words, they become more concrete and easier to analyze. For example, a person who feels overwhelmed might write about their day and discover that their stress is linked to specific events or unresolved issues. Similarly, someone who feels uncertain about a decision can use journaling to explore their motivations, fears, and desires. This process often reveals insights that may not be immediately obvious through casual thinking alone. Journaling can also help individuals track their progress over time. By revisiting past entries, they can see how their thoughts, behaviors, and attitudes have changed. This not only reinforces the value of self-honesty, but also provides motivation to continue the practice. It serves as a reminder that growth is possible and that even small efforts can lead to meaningful change. Another important way to develop self-honesty is by being open to feedback from others. While self-reflection is essential, it is not always sufficient. Individuals may have blind spots, areas of their behavior or personality that they are not fully aware of. Feedback from others can provide valuable perspectives that challenge one's assumptions and reveal aspects of oneself that might otherwise go unnoticed. However, receiving feedback requires an open and receptive mindset. It is natural to feel defensive when hearing criticism, especially if it conflicts with one's self-image. But responding defensively often prevents individuals from benefiting from the feedback. Instead, practicing self-honesty involves listening carefully, considering the validity of the feedback, and reflecting on whether it aligns with one's experiences. For example, if multiple people point out that someone tends to interrupt during conversations, it may be worth considering whether this behavior is accurate. Rather than dismissing the feedback, the individual can observe their interactions and make a conscious effort to improve. Even if the feedback is not entirely correct, it can still provide an opportunity for reflection and growth. It is also important to seek feedback from people who are trustworthy and constructive. Honest and supportive individuals are more likely to provide insights that are both accurate and helpful. By building relationships with people who value honesty, individuals create an environment that encourages self-awareness and personal development. Combining these practices, daily reflection, accepting mistakes, journaling, and listening to feedback, creates a strong foundation for self-honesty. Each method reinforces the others, making the overall process more effective. Reflection increases awareness. Acceptance promotes growth. Writing enhances clarity, and feedback provides new perspectives. Together, they form a comprehensive approach to understanding oneself more deeply. It is worth noting that practicing self-honesty is not about being overly critical or harsh. The goal is not to focus only on flaws or weaknesses, but to achieve a balanced and realistic view of oneself. This includes recognizing strengths, celebrating progress, and acknowledging efforts, as well as identifying areas for improvement. True self-honesty involves both honesty and compassion, being truthful without being unnecessarily judgmental. Over time, these practices can transform the way individuals think about themselves and their lives. They become more aware of their thoughts and emotions, more responsible for their actions, and more intentional in their decisions. They are less likely to be influenced by denial or illusion, and more likely to act in alignment with their values. This leads to a greater sense of authenticity, confidence, and fulfillment. In conclusion, practicing honesty with oneself requires deliberate effort and consistent practice. Through daily self-reflection, individuals learn to examine their thoughts and behaviors with clarity. By accepting mistakes, they turn failures into opportunities for growth. Through journaling, they gain deeper insight into their emotions and motivations, and by listening to feedback, they expand their understanding beyond their own perspective. Although the process may be challenging, it is ultimately one of the most valuable exercises a person can undertake, leading to a more honest, aware, and meaningful life. To fully understand the value of being honest with oneself, it is helpful to look at real-life situations where this principle makes a meaningful difference. While the idea of self-honesty can seem abstract, its impact becomes much clearer when applied to everyday experiences. Simple but powerful examples, such as a student recognizing their academic weaknesses or an adult realizing they are on the wrong career path, demonstrate how honesty with oneself can lead to growth, change, and a more fulfilling life. As Sigmund Freud emphasized, this kind of honesty is not easy, but it is a valuable exercise that can transform the way people think and act. Consider first the example of a student who admits that they are struggling academically. In many educational environments, there is significant pressure to perform well, achieve high grades, and meet expectations set by teachers, parents, and peers. Because of this pressure, it can be tempting for students to hide their weaknesses or make excuses for poor performance. A student who receives low grades might blame the difficulty of the subject, the teaching style, or even bad luck. While these factors may play a role, they often do not tell the whole story. A student who practices self-honesty takes a different approach. Instead of avoiding the truth, they are willing to admit, "I am not doing well in this subject, and I need to understand why." This admission requires courage, as it means confronting feelings of disappointment or insecurity. However, it also opens the door to improvement. By acknowledging their struggles, the student can begin to identify specific problems. Perhaps they lack effective study habits, struggle with time management, or do not fully understand the material being taught. Once these issues are recognized, the student can take practical steps to address them. They might create a study schedule, seek help from a teacher or tutor, or find new ways to engage with the material. Over time, these efforts can lead to noticeable improvement. More importantly, the student develops a mindset of responsibility and growth. Instead of seeing failure as something to hide, they begin to view it as an opportunity to learn and improve. In contrast, A student who avoids self-honesty may continue to struggle without making meaningful progress. By denying the problem or placing blame elsewhere, they miss the opportunity to take control of their situation. This not only affects their academic performance, but also their confidence and motivation. Over time, the gap between their potential and their actual performance may widen, leading to frustration and discouragement. This example clearly shows how self-honesty serves as the first and most important step toward positive change. A second example can be seen in the life of an adult who realizes they are on the wrong career path. Career choices are often influenced by a variety of factors, including financial considerations, family expectations, and societal definitions of success. As a result, many people find themselves in jobs that do not truly align with their interests, values, or strengths. At first, they may ignore this mismatch, convincing themselves that stability and external success are enough to ensure satisfaction. However, over time, signs of dissatisfaction often begin to appear. A person may feel unmotivated, stressed, or disconnected from their work. They might dread going to work each day or feel a lack of purpose in what they do. At this point, self-honesty becomes crucial. Instead of continuing to ignore these feelings, the individual must be willing to confront a difficult truth. This is not the right path for me. Admitting this can be extremely challenging. It may involve acknowledging that years of effort, education, or experience have been invested in a direction that no longer feels right. It may also bring fears about financial stability, uncertainty about the future, or concerns about how others will react. Despite these challenges, facing the truth is the only way to move forward. Once the individual accepts that they are on the wrong path, they can begin to explore alternatives. This might involve identifying their true interests, learning new skills, or even starting over in a different field. The process can be slow and uncertain, but it is ultimately guided by a clearer understanding of what they truly want. Over time, this shift can lead to greater satisfaction, motivation, and a sense of purpose. On the other hand, someone who avoids self-honesty in this situation may remain stuck in a career that does not fulfill them. They may continue to prioritize external expectations over internal satisfaction, leading to long-term unhappiness and regret. This highlights the importance of self-honesty not only in achieving success, but also in maintaining a sense of meaning and fulfillment in life. These two examples, one involving a student and the other an adult, illustrate a common pattern. In both cases, self-honesty begins with a willingness to confront an uncomfortable truth. This truth may be difficult to accept, but it provides the clarity needed to take action. Without it, individuals are likely to remain in situations that limit their growth and happiness. Furthermore, these examples demonstrate that self-honesty is not limited to a specific stage of life. It is a skill that remains relevant from childhood through adulthood. Whether in school, work, or personal relationships, the ability to be honest with oneself plays a critical role in shaping one's experiences and outcomes. It influences how individuals respond to challenges, make decisions, and pursue their goals. In addition, these real-life situations show that self-honesty is closely connected to responsibility. When individuals are honest with themselves, they take ownership of their circumstances. They recognize that while external factors may play a role, they also have the power to influence their own lives. This sense of responsibility is empowering, as it encourages proactive behavior and continuous improvement. Ultimately, these examples reinforce the idea that being entirely honest with oneself is indeed a valuable exercise. It requires courage, humility, and a willingness to face reality, but it also leads to meaningful change. Whether it is a student striving to improve academically or an adult seeking a more fulfilling career, self-honesty serves as the starting point for growth and transformation. By embracing this practice, individuals can move closer to becoming the best versions of themselves and living lives that truly reflect who they are. In the end, the meaning behind Sigmund Freud's statement, being entirely honest with oneself is a good exercise, becomes both clear and deeply relevant to everyday life. Self-honesty is not simply a moral suggestion or an abstract philosophical idea. It is a necessary and ongoing process of self-examination that shapes who we are and who we become. It requires us to look inward with clarity, to acknowledge both our strengths and our weaknesses, and to accept the truth about ourselves without distortion. In this sense, being honest with oneself is truly an exercise, one that must be practiced consistently, intentionally, and with patience over time. What makes this process so important is not only what it reveals, but what it builds. Through self-honesty, individuals develop a stronger sense of self-awareness, a clearer understanding of their values, and a more realistic view of their abilities and limitations. These qualities form the foundation for making better decisions, building meaningful relationships, and pursuing goals that genuinely align with one's identity. Without this foundation, it is easy to become lost in external expectations, illusions, or self-deception. With it, however, people gain a sense of direction and purpose that guides them through both challenges and opportunities. At the same time, it is essential to recognize that practicing self-honesty is not easy. It often requires confronting uncomfortable truths, admitting mistakes, and letting go of illusions that may feel safe or familiar. It challenges the ego, exposes vulnerability, and demands a level of courage that many people are not used to exercising. There will be moments of doubt, discomfort, and even resistance. There may be times when it feels easier to ignore the truth or to justify certain behaviors rather than face them directly. These difficulties are a natural part of the process, and they should not be seen as obstacles that prevent growth, but as necessary steps within it. In fact, the very difficulty of self-honesty is what gives it its long-term value. Just as physical exercise strengthens the body through effort and resistance, mental and emotional growth are achieved through facing challenges rather than avoiding them. Each time a person chooses to be honest with themselves, whether it is admitting a mistake, recognizing a weakness, or questioning a decision, they are strengthening their ability to grow. Over time, these small acts of honesty accumulate, leading to greater resilience, confidence, and maturity. The rewards may not always be immediate, but they are lasting and deeply meaningful. Moreover, self-honesty creates a sense of freedom that cannot be achieved through self-deception. When individuals no longer feel the need to hide from their own thoughts or emotions, they experience a greater sense of authenticity. They are able to live in alignment with their true selves rather than trying to meet unrealistic standards or maintain a false image. This authenticity fosters inner peace and reduces the internal conflict that often arises from pretending to be someone one is not. It allows individuals to accept themselves more fully while still striving to improve. It is also important to understand that self-honesty does not require perfection. The goal is not to eliminate flaws or to become flawless, but to see oneself clearly and to continue growing. Everyone has weaknesses, makes mistakes, and experiences moments of doubt. What matters is not avoiding these realities, but responding to them with honesty and a willingness to learn. In this way, self-honesty becomes a source of strength rather than a source of judgment. With this in mind, the most practical and meaningful takeaway is that self-honesty should begin with small, everyday actions. It does not require dramatic changes or life-altering decisions from the start. Instead, it can begin with simple moments of reflection, asking oneself honest questions at the end of the day, acknowledging when something does not feel right, or admitting when a mistake has been made. These small steps may seem insignificant at first, but they gradually build the habit of self-awareness and honesty. For example, taking a few minutes each day to reflect on one's actions and emotions can create a deeper understanding of personal patterns and behaviors. Being willing to say, "I could have handled that better," or "I am not as prepared as I should be," may feel uncomfortable, but it is a powerful step toward improvement. Over time, these small acts of honesty become more natural, and the process of self-reflection becomes an integral part of daily life. In addition, individuals can practice self-honesty by being more mindful of their decisions and motivations. Before making a choice, they can ask themselves whether it aligns with their true values or whether it is influenced by external pressure. This level of awareness helps ensure that actions are guided by authenticity rather than expectation. It also reinforces the habit of questioning assumptions and seeking truth, even when it is difficult. Ultimately, the journey towards self-honesty is a continuous one. There is no final destination where a person becomes completely and permanently honest with themselves. Instead, it is a lifelong process of learning, adjusting, and growing. Each stage of life brings new challenges, new experiences, and new insights, all of which require ongoing reflection and honesty. The more this practice is embraced, the more natural it becomes, and the more it contributes to a meaningful and fulfilling life. In conclusion, being entirely honest with oneself is indeed a necessary and valuable exercise. It is not an easy path, but it is one that leads to lasting growth, deeper self-understanding, and a more authentic way of living. By starting with small, consistent efforts and remaining committed to the process, anyone can develop this habit and use it as a foundation for becoming a better version of themselves each day. Thank you for spending this quiet moment with Lunar Reflections. I truly appreciate you being here and listening all the way through. If this story brought you even a little clarity or peace, don't forget to subscribe and stay with us on this journey. Now, as the day comes to an end, I hope you can let go of everything that's been weighing on your mind. Take a deep breath and allow yourself to rest. Wishing you a calm heart, a peaceful mind, and a truly restful night.